First, AIM's antitrust policy. It is the policy of AIM to conduct its operations in strict compliance with the antitrust laws. No AIM activity shall create even the appearance of a violation of the letter or spirit of the antitrust laws. And then our collaboration and work product policy. AIM committee meetings are held for the primary purpose of advancements in our industry, which necessarily involves development of work product intended solely for the public domain. AIM has developed this policy for the protection of its members who engage in this important collaborative effort. And then just a few other housekeeping notes. All participants are muted upon entering the meeting. If you would like to ask a question, you can select the Q&A icon at the bottom of the webinar application. Questions will be answered at the end of the presentation, and a recording of this session will be available in the coming days. And with that, I'll turn it over to AIM's Vice Chair, Patty Blessing.
Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us today. Just wanted to remind you each of our industry group mission, which is we get together to empower, connect, and advance women in the AIDC industry by fostering leadership, innovation, and inclusion. Through networking, education, and advocacy, we create opportunities for women to thrive and drive meaningful impact in technology, business, and global supply chains. And we'd like to welcome our guest speaker today, Hannah Bernard, who is Vice President of Marketing at Avery Dennison. Hannah is a dynamic Vice President of Marketing, bringing over 16 years of experience in diverse marketing roles across both startups and Fortune 500 companies. With a strong foundation in marketing communications, she excels in leading global teams to deliver innovative marketing strategies that drive brand reputation and business growth. Her commitment to inclusivity is evident through her co-founding of The Collective, a mentoring initiative for women, showcasing her passion for empowering others. Hannah's extensive expertise spans digital marketing, content strategy, and public relations, making her a key player in shaping Avery Dennison's narrative in sustainability and innovation. Her strategic vision and hands-on leadership styles have consistently transformed marketing functions, resulting in world-class outcomes. She was instrumental in launching Avery's Making Possible branding campaign. Outside of work, Hannah is keen on fostering connections and collaboration within the industry, reflecting her belief in the power of community. And with that, we'd like to welcome Hannah to share some of her thoughts. Hannah.
Thanks, Patty. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. It's really nice to have the opportunity to speak with you all. I wanted to kick off with telling you a little bit more about me. I am a mum of two, a 7-year-old boy and a 4-year-old girl, and we live with my husband in London. We've been here for almost 18 years now. I actually started my career in the fashion industry, believe it or not. So when I left university, I headed for the big lights of the City of London. And with one aim, I wanted to get a job. I wanted to build my own independence, and I wanted to, to build a career. And so I moved to London. I spent a number of years working across the fashion industry. And it was, as many people think about it, quite a lot of glitz and glam. And it got to the point that, and I always joke with myself when I say this because it sounds like I'm super ungrateful. But champagne and canapes for dinner 4 times a week wasn't quite cutting it when I wanted to get married and start a family. So I then had the opportunity to join Avery Dennison, and I've been at Avery Dennison now for just over 12 years, 10 of those working in the AIDC space, and it's been incredible. So and one thing I would say is when I was given the opportunity to lead the marketing activity across what was then our RFID division that's now moved into and become our intelligent labels platform across the enterprise, was I knew nothing about RFID. Nothing. It scared me a little bit, if I'm honest. I'm not from a technology background. As I just said, I came from fashion, actually studied psychology at university. And so moving into what was, quite an engineering focused tech role was, a little bit scary. But I think that's going to form part of the conversation that we have today with regards to taking risks and, putting yourself forward or exploring the unknown. So first of all, I wanted to just raise something. I was actually at a Amazon leadership conference last week. And we spent a lot of time talking about the role of emotional intelligence. But not only that, also the role that AI is going to play. So I'm sure many of you are currently in discussions across your organizations on how AI is going to change the roles that we do. I've been involved in conversations, and it's what we hear all the time in media. Are roles going to be made redundant because AI is going to take over? And what I like to do is think about it in a different way. And so rather than how could we do more, is how could we do things better? So I think there's absolutely a role that AI can play, especially when I think of my own role in terms of marketing and communications. There's a ton of data-driven decision making that we can do, right? Whether that's campaign activation and understanding how we've managed to drive leads that convert into revenue opportunities. So drilling down into that data and understanding how that can inform our future decision making around campaigns or how we're driving demand generation across our target audiences is extremely important. But one thing that AI cannot do is, or does not have, should I say, is emotional intelligence. And that is going to be key and a unique differentiator for all of us as we move forward, because emotional intelligence is absolutely key in terms of creativity, thinking outside of the box, coming up with new ideas, but most importantly of all, building high-performing teams. And so we spent a lot of time last week talking about that role of emotional intelligence and how we as leaders actually have a huge opportunity here to differentiate ourselves by leveraging AI to our benefit, but freeing us up to spend more time and driving more impact across the organizations that we work in. And there's a stat, which is leaders that have high EQ have teams that are 3 times more likely to stay at a business. And so what you'll find is it's the leader that people stay for, right? You always hear that. I had an amazing manager. That's the reason that I stayed in that role. So I think this is something important for all of us to be aware of, is the role that we play as leaders, and especially with how we help other women across the organization to thrive. So the other thing I wanted to delve into when it comes down to emotional intelligence is that role of emotions. I'm sure many of you have been told throughout your careers that perhaps sometimes you've been too emotional, or how to manage those emotions when you're in the room. And that's something, again, I'm pretty passionate about. Ironic, as we're talking about emotions and passion and frustration. But the main thing here is that if used correctly, emotions are extremely contagious. They can drive engagement and they help to foster inclusivity. And there's 2 main pieces around emotional intelligence that we control. So self-awareness, how we understand how we're feeling and the role that that can have on our performance and how we interact with others. And then also self-management. So when we acknowledge that, and there's loads of TED Talks on this, which is almost your body scan, or you've probably been sent a Harvard Business Review daily tip on this. Self-awareness, have a look at or understand how you're feeling in that moment. So this idea of a body scan, which is where do you feel your emotion? For me, if I'm nervous about something, if I'm worried about it, it hits here, right? It hits my chest. I can feel it immediately. And my pulse will quicken. I'll also get sweaty palms. And I think, okay, there's something going on here that's making me feel uncomfortable. But that's all part of the self-awareness. As soon as I feel that, I know, I'm like, right, okay. For me, I need to take a big breath, or I need to do some box breathing, whatever it might be, just to calm or center my own emotions, so that then I can self-manage that and have a positive impact on others. But then there's the piece which is with regards to social interactions and your relationships with other people and how you find value in diversity. I'm really pleased to see the mission from an AIM perspective that Patty read out, which didn't talk about diversity, actually. It talked about inclusivity. Because if you don't have inclusivity, you can't have diverse teams. There's no point in being, that only woman in the room so that you've ticked a list that it's not an all male group, if you then feel like your voice can't really be heard and you don't feel safe to raise your hand in that room. So I think a big part of that is ensuring that you are building inclusivity across the team so that everybody can have a voice. And that means that you need to understand that everybody is different and everyone's coming at things from a different place. And there's also this visual, which is, if you think about a big circle and then a tiny dot in the middle, this idea that everybody has a lot going on in their lives, but there's probably only a tiny bit that we as leaders have visibility to. And so recognizing that everyone's different, everyone's experiencing things in a different way, and trying to put yourself in those individuals' shoes and create environments that enables them to thrive, I think is extremely important. There was a book that I read, and I always joke with my team about this because I am that person that goes on holiday and then my way to relax is that I'll read a business book. I can't help it. It helps me to turn off, ironically. This year I read Hidden Potential by Adam Grant, which I found it extremely interesting. It talks all about the fact that everybody approaches things in different ways, and you as a leader have to adapt to those individuals. And there was a really interesting section within this book that said, when we have an interview process, we expect people to come in and perform amazingly, which just it seems counterintuitive. Like, when we are not in an interview every day perfecting those skills. And probably for some of you who, perhaps you've been in roles for many years, perhaps you've only worked at a couple of places, that skill of being in an interview, being under a huge amount of pressure, being asked questions that honestly you're probably never going to get asked again in the role that you join, is a real stressor. So you're going to behave and react in a way that doesn't feel natural to you. And actually Adam Grant talked through this. I think there was a study done where they set up the situation to enable people to have a second chance and to give feedback and say, in order for me to turn up right, I need to feel more comfortable in this way. And so they set up an environment to enable people to thrive, which I thought was incredible. And ultimately that's all about making sure that you set up an environment and a team dynamic that accounts for people and their preferences, and that everybody's going to have a unique perspective. So for me, that's something that's really important. But it also leads me on to understanding your audience. So something that's been a real eye-opener for me, I think, during my career and the time spent at Avery Dennison, is I'm working with many, many different functions. So in the marketing team, we work with commercial, we work with IT, we work with legal, we work across probably the majority of the organization. And so we're interacting with lots of different people all the time. We may also find that we need to influence those people in different ways, perhaps in order to get their support or sponsorship to drive projects forward. It might be about funding a new project. It could be, driving change across the organization. And what I've learned is that it's all about putting yourself in the shoes of the individual that you're talking to and understanding what do they care about. And something that I found to be extremely useful in my journey at Avery Dennison is having a trusted advisory board, let's say, internally. And these trusted advisors are, tend to be people I'm friends with within the organization, right? People that I trust, that I can go to and I can say, hey, I've got an idea. It might be a crazy idea, right? Something very different to what we've done before. I want to present to you as, my trusted advisor, and I need you to put yourself in the shoes of our CFO or our CEO, right? And what I found over the years is those trusted advisors, because they're by nature, right, I trust them. That's why I've gone to them. I want their feedback. It really helps, because then I'm not on any form of defensive, because I've gone to them, I've said, please give me advice. I want you to help me. This is making me feel more confident to go in and present to that particular leader that's going to be the ultimate approver of this big idea that I've got. And so that's what I've done multiple times during my career at Avery Dennison. And I found, it's been extremely important in helping me to navigate the organization, but also to grow within my roles at the business. And I think a key piece that there is feedback. And so my boss, and if any of you are from Avery Dennison on this call, you'll probably know who I'm talking about. He has always said feedback is a gift. And sometimes it's a bit of a joke, right? Because it's feedback you didn't necessarily ask for. However, I think I agree, feedback is really important. And again, it's Adam Grant who has said in the past, if you ignore feedback, you fail twice. Because feedback is that opportunity for you to understand how something's landed with somebody else and for them to give you some advice and potentially on how to improve, evolve, or to grow that idea, or for you as an individual to grow. And so I think something that I found very important is that acceptance of feedback. And also as that individual, and we've all been there, right, where you don't want feedback, and perhaps you're feeling really vulnerable about something, and what you really want to hear is just everyone tell you something's brilliant, but actually the joy is in that feedback because it's going to make it brilliant. And a piece of advice I would say is always assume positive intent from the person that's giving you the feedback. The vast majority of the time, people aren't giving you feedback to negatively impact you, right? They're taking the time to give feedback because they care. So assume positive intent, or as one of my team would say, generous thinking. So always assume that somebody is coming at it with the best intentions. And I want to also spend some time talking about cultural differences and the role that plays in inclusivity and managing expectations. I work in a global role. Avery Dennison's a global business. I've got team members all over the world. And so it's extremely important for me to anticipate different ways that people might want to interact, or how potentially they're going to react to something, a situation or a conversation that we're having. So this difference in communication styles around the world is really important to understand. I've got a book on my bookshelf. Actually, it sits here all the time, which it's got a blurred background on, but The Culture Map by Erin Meyer. This is a book that I read quite a number of years ago, but it sits on my bookshelf because sometimes there'll be a situation and I'm thinking, well, I don't understand why that person's reacted like that. But, I had absolute positive intent. They've assumed that the feedback that I've given them or the way I've interacted with them has created a negative experience for them. Why is that? The Culture Map is a really great one because it talks to the fact that, if you're somebody that grew up in a certain country with a particular culture, you're going to react in a very different way than somebody from another culture. And understanding, and this is where my background in psychology comes into play, understanding how people behave is really important in building these diverse and inclusive, high-performing teams. And I've got a bit of a personal anecdote actually to share, which is how I've grown as an individual over this time. So and I joke with my husband about this. I am somebody that's very punctual. I hate being late. I really hate being late. And it's kind of part of my core values as well, which is I am an absolute optimizer. I will make the most out of every minute, partly because I'm a busy working mum, but also just because it's me. I feel like if I haven't done 2 or 3 things or tried to do 2 or 3 things at once, I feel like I haven't been productive enough, which we'll get on to multitasking in a second. But with my husband's family, his dad's side of the family is from St. Lucia in the Caribbean. And therefore, by nature, they are much more laid back. And generally, if we say to them, hey, come over at 12 noon for lunch, they're going to arrive mid-afternoon, and they're probably going to arrive with more guests than I invited. This used to drive me really crazy because I like to have, a certain amount of control. I'm organizing this as an event. Events is part of my DNA within marketing. Everything has its place. But I very much learned after 10 years being married to my husband and 18 years together that I had to adapt, right? And so now I know there are things that I can control. And one of those is I have way more time than I anticipate to get ready for this function. So if I've invited people around at 12 noon, I know that I've probably got an extra hour and a half to build that balloon arch before anybody's going to walk through the door. And I need to make sure that I've catered for a few extra guests just in case. So I think some of this is how do we manage or control our controllables, let's say, to help us to adapt to other people. And so that's just something funny that I laugh with my husband about, that how different I was, or I am now, should I say, compared to when he met me 18 years ago, where everything had to have its place. But that's the joy, I think, of coming together and building those diverse teams. And so I said we were going to talk about multitasking. And I can't see a show of hands, so I'll envision that you guys are putting your hands up. But I'm sure there's many of you who have either created a job description where you've said, this individual must be incredible at multitasking, or you yourself describe yourself as a brilliant multitasker. I've just said it, right? I feel like I'm not productive if I'm not emptying the dishwasher and putting a load of washing on and feeding the children. It's like this. You feel like you're multitasking and winning at life. The reality is you actually can't do two high cognitive tasks at once. You think you can, but you can't. It's why you can't drive and text on your phone at the same time. It's why you can't listen to a webinar and be on your emails and be concentrating on both. It's not possible because they're two high cognitive engagement tasks. You can do one high, one low. So if you are gardening whilst also listening to an audiobook, you can probably do both of those quite effectively, because one of those is a low cognitive task and the other one's a high cognitive task. But the reality is you can't do two of the high cognitive tasks at the same time. And what that leads me into is focus. So another big thing that I try and maintain in my working week is ensuring that I've got time to focus and prioritize on the important things. And I do this for a couple of reasons. One, it goes back to this self-awareness and self-management. So as an example, this morning, I knew I had this talk. I know that I wanted to spend an hour just preparing my thoughts about what I wanted to talk through today. And I do that for a couple of reasons, right? One, I want to ensure that I give a good talk. Two, it makes me feel better. I feel more prepared. I'm not getting that sense of anxiety, that feeling that comes up in my chest or the sweaty palms, because I've blocked the time out. I focused in on, this is something important for me today, and I want to make sure that I'm prepared. But I do that for all of the super high priority tasks. So I look at my calendar for the week and I think, right, I've got a handful of things here that I know are super critical. They're the top of my to-do list. If I didn't get anything else done this week, that's fine. That's where I'm winning, right? But I need to focus in on those. I can't be trying to do 100 things at once because none of them are going to get done well. There are a number of tactics I use when I'm focusing. One of those is turning off notifications. So there's nothing more distracting, and there's loads of research that's gone on to this in terms of how your brain is trying to flick from one thing to another. So if you get interrupted because your phone has pinged or an email's gone off or a chat's gone off, I don't know the exact number, but it's at least 10 minutes it takes you to then focus back in on your high cognitive engagement task. So you can imagine if you do that all day, you're on calls, you're trying to multitask, and you think, right, I've got half an hour to do something really important. The likelihood is you're not going to be able to zone in and do that really well because you haven't given yourself enough time to really focus in and prepare. And so what I tend to do is I'll block out chunks of my day if I know that I've got something really important to do, so that I can focus in that time and attention. But this also works the other way too, from a personal perspective. I told you at the beginning, I've got 2 young children. Anybody with children know that they need a lot of attention and they want you to be fully present with them. And this is another area where I really try hard not to multitask. I think we've all been there where there's a big deadline due. There's chats going off with the team, which is, oh, we need to make decisions on this, etc. And you catch yourself trying to engage with your children as well as keep something going at work. And the reality is it's really hard. It's then I will find myself becoming more impatient because I'm trying to flip from one to the other. And it's really, really hard to do and be present in any one area. So what I really aim to do is that I block out time in the evening. So when it's my time to go pick up the children from school, I then have a couple of hours where I am absolutely present with them. I don't look at my phone. I try not to have any interaction from a work perspective. There's something super urgent, I'll have delegated it to one of the team and then say I'll be back on later to, finalize this and sort it out. But for me, it's really important that the children have some of me in the day, right? I'm a full-time working mum. They've been at school all day. They want to come home. They want to talk to me. They want to tell me what's gone on. They also need me. They need me to make their dinner, to look after them, to bathe them, to put them to bed. So having that present time with them reduces the stresses all round because they feel like their needs have been met. I feel fulfilled because they're happy. And then we can, after that, once they're in bed, I can log back in if that's what I need to do and continue with work. And I'm sure many of you have heard of Shonda Rhimes. She's done some brilliant talks. And she's written books and TED Talks, etc. One that really resonated with me was The Year of Yes. And this connects very much with the children. I think she said that she used to get asked all the time, the children would say, please, 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 can you play Lego with me? And she would say, no, I haven't got time, or yes, I will, but in a minute. I'm busy right now. I just need to do a work call, and then I'll be with you. And the reality is, most of the time when you've said that, you're not going to get to them, right? And they'll have gone off and they're doing something else. They potentially are disappointed, but also the reality is, and this is what comes through Shonda's talk, is they probably only wanted 15 minutes of your focused time. And after that 15 minutes, they're actually a bit bored of you and they're going to go off and do something else. But if we always respond with, no, something else is more important with you right now, that doesn't show that we're prioritizing them. So that's something that's always really stuck with me. And it's like the moments that I can be present, I really try to be. Another thing that Shonda said was when she's winning at work, she was almost always failing somewhere else in her life. And I think she said, she was writing an amazing script for Scandal while she was missing something over here to do with her family. And this resonates with me a lot this week, actually, as next week I'll be in Boston for our leadership meeting. So great, winning from a career perspective. I'm in that senior leadership meeting, the end of year meeting in Boston, having strategic conversations, great, makes me feel amazing. My trade-off with that is I'm missing my daughter's first Christmas show. And I also missed my son's first Christmas show because apparently it must always be this week that they do it when they start school. And I think for me, I have to acknowledge I'm sad. I'm sad about it, right? I'm sad. I wish that I could be there. What I can control is that my husband will be there and he'll take pictures and I'll FaceTime afterwards and see her happy face after she's just done an amazing performance. But it doesn't take away the fact that I'm not going to be there. Now, many people talk about mum guilt and not, feeling really bad. And I think that's somewhere where I want to just emphasize that I don't think we have to feel guilty. I make a choice to be in this role, right? I don't have a choice not to work. I need to work to live, but I choose to be in this role. I choose to be to lead a team, to be in a leadership position that means that I do have to travel. So I am choosing to be in Boston next week. That doesn't mean I'm not sad about the situation that I miss her show, but I think what's more important to me is that my daughter sees what I'm doing. I'm really, really passionate about leadership, female leadership, empowering women, helping women to close that gap, the gender gap, building confidence, helping people to become the best that they can be. And a big part of that is representation. So for me, it's actually super important that she sees that I'm there, that I am, I'm going to have the opportunity to speak in front of those leaders next week. Like, that's what I want her to see, that I work really hard, and I'm hopefully making a difference in the corporate world that's helping for future women to drive those leadership positions as well. But I think the other piece is that I really want my son to see that too. I want my son to see strong women that are fulfilled and happy in the roles that they have, and that if the choice is that they want to be a full-time career woman and a mum, like, that is possible, with the trade-offs, as we've said. So it's all about where we can win in life, and we're not going to win everywhere all at the same time, but I think it's rationalizing that in your mind. And that leads me on to the role of mentoring and supporting women. So I've just said that it's something I'm extremely passionate about. And I talked to Mary Lou about this on the podcast, which I think actually launched last week. I launched a women's mentoring program 4 years ago when I came back from maternity leave from having my daughter. And the reason that I launched it was actually with a colleague at the time who had literally just joined the business. And I came back from maternity leave and I said, how do you feel about setting up a women's mentoring program? And she was all for it. I said, coming back in as, a senior leader in the business, I don't have many people I can turn to for advice that truly understand where I am in my life at this moment in time, right? And as we know, majority of leadership teams have mostly men. And I think for a female coming in, 2 children, I wanted somebody that I could talk to that understood my position. And so we developed the collective, where we match mentees with mentors from across the organization. And the mentoring program has two lenses. One is that we support individuals through the moment in life that they're going through. So for me, that was coming back from maternity life as a mum of 2, juggling work and family life. For others, it could be, caring for elderly parents. It might be that they've just gone through a traumatic experience in their life and they just want to be able to talk to somebody else that's been through that to help give them advice and help them to see kind of like light at the end of the tunnel. Obviously, the other lens is about career growth and how to instill confidence and help to provide a path forward for individuals who are looking to develop in their career. And this year, we've actually got 180 pairings, which we're extremely excited about. And we're driving cross-business collaboration. So a number of those pairings are from, a mentee and a mentor from different parts of the organization, which helps to drive teamwork and also enables people to have mobility across the enterprise. But also what we've shown is from the statistics, those that have come through as a mentee are being promoted or they're moving into different roles at a faster rate than those that have not been a mentee in the organization. So for me, this is something that I am extremely proud of. I'm pleased that we've been able to do it for people across the organization. But it's also, it's a real fulfillment piece for me. And I always get asked the question, there's so much going on. The business is full on, as I'm sure many of your roles are. And, we've talked about a lot going on in my personal life as well. It's like, how do I find the time? For me, the mentoring program is one of those pieces that just fills me with a huge amount of energy. So I get a lot of energy from helping to support others, from giving advice, instilling confidence, and enabling them to grow in their career, or simply, go through a moment in their lives and find that fulfillment at the end. So that's something that is extremely important to me. The other piece that I wanted to talk about is procrastination and stepping into the unknown. I think there's been a big piece throughout my career. One of my mottos is what's the worst that can happen? And there's calculated risk taking, right? So if you look at it and the worst that can happen is something that you really don't want to happen, then of course you're not going to go down that route. But I think there's a big piece from a mentoring perspective that it's all about confidence and instilling confidence in people because of lived experiences. So having a mentor that can say, I've been there, I hear you, have you tried this? Have you tried that? Have you reached out to this person? Somebody there that can just be that little person on your shoulder that can give you that extra little bit of confidence to maybe take that leap or to move forward is really important. But then there's also a piece which I think is very much tied to mentoring and growth, which is procrastination. And I think there's two parts of procrastination. One is there's a whole load of things on the to-do list we just simply don't want to do because we don't like them. And I think that's fair. I think that all of us know that there are things or parts of our jobs or parts of our daily lives, like I really don't want to do that. It's not something I enjoy, but we also know we have to do it. And depends how you work. I actually prefer to get those things out of the way so I can focus on what I really enjoy. My husband is the opposite. He will leave all of that stuff right till the last minute, and it drives me a little bit crazy. But we're all individuals. But I think the other part of procrastination is being scared of the unknown. And this is the part that I really love, because when I'm mentoring people, I love digging into that piece. And I kind of say, you kind of scratch the surface. I'm just going to dig a little bit deeper on there, which is why are you holding back? Why haven't you invested time in that? And usually what it comes down to is you're actually a bit scared. You're scared because you've not done it before, or because you don't know if you have the skill set, or you don't have the confidence to put your hand up. And that, I think, is almost the best place to be, because it means you have the opportunity to grow. And that's something that I really hope that I can kind of instill in all of you, that if there is an opportunity and it makes you feel that feeling of like, I don't think I want to do this, it's probably because it's going to be the most important thing for you and your career and your growth and fulfillment in the future. And so if I can give any advice, you can take my motto, which is, what's the worst that's going to happen? And if the worst that's going to happen is it potentially gives you a huge opportunity, then go ahead and give it a shot. I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to answer any questions that you might have.
All right, and so we'll get into the Q&A now. One of the questions that we got through the registration page that I have here is, throughout my career, I've seen how assertiveness is often celebrated in men and punished in women. When a man is decisive, he's called a leader. When a woman shows that same strength, she's labeled with something diminishing, such as pit bull or difficult, or even worse. I've experienced this personally. How have you navigated these double standards in your own leadership, and what advice do you give to women who want to lead with strength without being reduced by gendered labels?
This is a great question, and it's something, I've experienced it myself. I think probably the vast majority of you have done the same, right? I think there's this assertiveness, which is, I think it even goes back to, it's systemic. Let me start there. I think it's systemic. So the way that we bring up boys and girls is a problem, or have in the past, the way we've raised boys and girls is a problem that then exemplifies itself when you get into the working world. So the fact that we call, girls will say, don't be bossy, but you wouldn't really say that to a boy, right? Boys naturally are encouraged to take risks, to be the leaders. Girls, yes, they kind of get labeled like that. I would say my advice to you, or how I've dealt with it in the room, facts, not feelings, right? Point out the differences, but in a way that is, very balanced, and be curious and ask questions. I think it's quite hard if you're having a discussion with somebody and you say to them, can you help me to understand, or can you help to provide feedback as to, how you would recommend that I handled that situation, or in comparison to my male colleague, I observed that individual acted like this. Help me understand how that was different from what I was just doing, or can you give me an opportunity to explain why I reacted like that? So I think there's a piece there which is lead with curiosity, because if you ask the questions, and make sure they're open-ended questions, right? As opposed to a yes or a no, it makes them think. Now, I'm not looking at everything through rose-tinted glasses. I think, unfortunately, we still have a lot of challenges across the working world where that bias is just naturally there, and perhaps the person that you're going to ask that question to is not going to react in the way that you would want, which is really unfortunate. But I think you have that right to point out the bias, and do that through fact, and try and keep the emotion intact, which I know that's the hard piece, because naturally there's a fire and a passion and a frustration, because you're like, this isn't fair. Like, hold on a second, I've just seen this play out in front of my eyes. How is that person being treated like that, and I'm being treated differently? I think that's the self-management piece that I started talking about, right? Harness that frustration and energy and kind of go back to the curiosity. Help me understand why, or help me understand how you would recommend I approach that differently in order to get my point across next time, and kind of put the ball in their court to justify why that bias occurred.
And then our next question today. You've played a significant role in shaping Avery Dennison's narrative around sustainability and innovation. How do you approach translating complex technical topics like circularity or digital identification into clear, compelling stories that resonate with customers and the broader market?
Great question. And this takes me back to all of those feelings I had when I was asked to take the RFID marketing, right? I don't know what I'm doing in this space. The reality is, you're talking to humans. The storytelling is to a human. So it's understanding what they care about, putting yourself in their shoes, but also translating things in a way that's easy to understand. Because I think quite often, and again, this is where I started, right? I looked at this and thought, oh my goodness, this is really technical. I don't understand what half of this means. How do I effectively talk about this? And the reality is, you want to know what the impact of technology is. What's the benefit, right? What impact is this going to have on my business? And a lot of that is to do with, especially when you look at RFID or AIDC technologies, it is driving productivity, improving transparency, driving optimization. All of that is easy for them people to understand. Even if you go down to, okay, tell me about inventory management. Oh, it's about knowing what you have, where you have it, when you need it. Right? You make it really basic, right? I often say to the team when we're talking through something quite complex, I'm like, if you were to go and tell your mum or your cousin about this, would they understand what you were trying to say? And if the answer is no, it's like, go back and simplify and contextualize it so that the storytelling lands with the audience. And don't get me wrong, there is a place for much more technical product marketing in there as well. But generally, that audience that you're going to be talking to understands that landscape, so they get it. But when you are marketing or storytelling around the benefits of the business, it's all about the impact that it has, and a lot of the time on people's personal lives. So if I take that circularity piece, it's translating it into, what does it mean for me? Okay, well, if I'm buying this jumper, one, I want to know what it's made of, and ideally what the journey that it's taken along the supply chain. I don't want to buy from certain brands that we know are overproducing at a really low cost and polluting the world. That's a choice that I make. So I'm looking for that, right? And when you think about circularity, it's what would I then want to do with this? Okay, well, if I know what it is, then I know how to repair it. I now know if I want to perhaps resell it. What does that mean? Okay, we're going to put it on a Vinted or an eBay or donate it to Goodwill so that it extends its life. And what happens after that? So it's all about and then it becomes a storytelling of the jumper or the sweatshirt, right? And then I'm like, it jumper, yep, very UK term. But you see what I'm trying to say, right? It's all the storytelling. It just makes it very human. So I think that's the way I've always approached the work that I do at Avery Dennison. And the piece around making possible, which led into our 90th anniversary campaign this year, it got down to the brand essence of who we are and what we do. We have been making possible for 90 years. So Stan Avery invented the first self-adhesive label in 1935. We continue to problem solve, innovate, push boundaries in order to make the world better in whichever way that is. So I think, yeah, all about human storytelling.
All right. And then our next question here. I too find reading business books to be inspirational and motivational. What is next on your reading list?
I'm pleased I'm not the only one. I'm currently reading Let Them. And oh goodness, Mel, someone, and now it skips my mind. Somebody write it in the thing if you know who the author is. It's just gone out of my mind. But Let Them is all about how you cannot control what other people are going to do, but you can control how you react to it. So again, goes back to that self-management piece, and knowing that you have a role to play. And this is actually really important in leadership, which is I got access to lots and lots of different information, right? Not all of it's going to be useful for me to translate to others. So it's like when you think, somebody might react in a certain way, and it's like, let them. And it's the rationalization of why are they reacting like that? Why are they approaching a situation like that? And then the outcome of it is let me. So how do I choose to react? That person may be frustrated. I may understand some of what's going on behind it. I might not. But what can I do? How can I self-manage my reaction to drive the outcome that I want? Because, it's not good for me to react in a frustrated way to them, right? That just causes more frustration and puts me in a bad place potentially, right? So it's like I have a level of control as to how I drive that in terms of the let them, let me. So that's the one I'm halfway through. And I've got some others on my desk. I've got one which I haven't yet started. So if you've read it, you can tell me what you think of it. But it's A New Way to Think by Roger L. Martin. This blurred thing doesn't help, does it? That's the other one that I've got there in kind of the queue. So we'll see if I get to that over the holiday period.
And we had people put in the Q&A that the author for the Let Them theory is Mel Robbins.
There you go, Mel. I lost it. I lost the second name. Mel Robbins. It's a good one.
All right. And then our next question. Congratulations on starting the collective program at Avery Dennison. It now includes both females and males. There's a need across the board regardless of sex. How did you convince the leadership to start the program? How does it translate globally? And is there cultural differences, correct?
Good question. So yes, you call that a very good point. This year we expanded the program to all employees. So it's all employees across EMENA. We have a global view from certain parts of our business, and then we hope to expand it further globally in future cohorts. So in terms of getting approval, interesting one, right? Because essentially this is like a magic time project. It's not something that's part of my role, but it's part of something that I think is important for me as a leader. And so I pitched it into my boss at the time and my HR partner. And it was kind of a case of, all right, yeah, go for it, see how it goes. And it was me and a colleague who was no longer at Avery Dennison, but she was a massive part of launching the collective. It was the two of us. Literally just the two of us. And we said, right, fine, we're going to start small. We're going to prove it, which we did. So at that time, we launched it with the Smart Track division, which is the Intelligent Labels business. And it was 18 pairs at the beginning. And we handpicked every single pairing, because we knew I knew a lot of, or I knew a lot of the people across the organization. And my colleague at the time, she was relatively new, but she's a brilliant influencer. And so we essentially just used our own superpowers to pull people together and engage the teams. And it worked. And so in year 2, we expanded it. We essentially doubled it. And yeah, I think we got up to maybe it was 32 pairings that year. And then we got approval to take it global across one of our groups, so half of the business. And we hit 109 pairings. And then this year, when we expanded to include males as well, we've hit 180. And we actually still handpicked everybody, which was really important. We need to leverage AI next year to help with the pairing. So that's one that's on the to-do list. But it's always been such an important part because it was about understanding who would vibe really well with each other. Right. And some of it was understanding people's personal situations. So I know that particular person has an elderly parent that they are caring for. So when a mentee comes to us and says, hey, I'm looking for somebody that has experience in being a carer, we knew personally those people are going to get on really well. They've got a similar experience and a need that we can put together. Obviously, that's much, much harder when you've got 180 people to pair. But what we did do is there's more of us. So I think we had 7 volunteers this year, and we actually spent time and we did interviews with the mentees that we didn't know to better understand them, just get a bit of a bit of a vibe as to what type of personality do you have, what are you looking for, and we still hand matched everybody. So we really did look at cultural differences as important as well, because if you know that somebody has a certain communication style, perhaps if they're very direct, you don't want to put them with somebody that's really going to not react very well to that. So that plays a huge part. But we are going to have to leverage the power of AI going forward to allow us to continue to expand it, because unfortunately it's not sustainable for us to continue hand matching like we have in the past.
All right, and then our last question for today. Hannah, you've led marketing teams across both fast-paced startups and global Fortune 500 organizations. What leadership lessons have been most valuable in guiding cross-functional teams through major brand transformations, like Avery Dennison's Making Possible campaign?
I think the biggest leadership advice that I would give is trust your team. I think trust is one of the most important things when you're building high performing teams. Like if you don't have psychological safety, that people feel that they can take risks and that you're going to have their back, then you won't get the innovation and creativity that you need to drive those brand building campaigns. So I think trust is the biggest piece, but also that goes hand in hand with trust is autonomy and empowerment. So we've known as we've built teams across the organization, we are often, I kind of joke, beg, borrowing and stealing to build teams that can help us to launch some of these campaigns that haven't been done before, right? So we don't have a team that's sat there ready formed with all the skill set that we need to go out and drive this activity. Quite often it's about influence and network. So it's very much about many of us in the team kind of going out and saying, right, we need somebody that's this sort of skill set or this sort of background for this to be successful. Who do we know? Who can we influence? How can we secure some of their time? How can we get them on board within the team? And so it's kind of building the building blocks of what's going to make it successful. So I would say it's probably those leadership principles: trust and empowerment of the team. It's super important. If they don't feel that they've got trust, they're not going to take any risks. You're not going to have anything that's compelling and groundbreaking. And then the other piece is influence and network, and always remember the impact of your relationships on both of those, because if you haven't spent time building out your network and building relationships with individuals, when you get to the point that you need to ask someone for a favor or for them to go out of their way or to sponsor a program, because as I say, that's the other piece that's really important, is for a number of things that we've done across Avery Dennison, it's who are our leadership sponsors, because having their perspective, their buy-in, and also support at the table is really important when decisions need to be made and we need to influence, a member of the senior leadership team.
Anna, thank you so much. We really, really appreciate your time today. I think we all feel very inspired,
Oh, thank you.
and we appreciate the time you spent to prepare because it was very clear that you had prepared and had a lot of things to share that I think will impact a lot of us, and we very much appreciate that. With that, we'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. We'd like to remind you to stay connected. We have expanded our group quite a bit, but we'd like to continue to expand it. So, we do this quarterly. We'd invite you to invite someone that you think might benefit from joining this group. Remember, it's free of charge to join us for the next webinar, which will be announced in the next 30 days. We also want to remind you that many of our members will be at the upcoming NRF show in New York in January. And if you're there, be sure to reach out to the fellow members of this group and say hi and get the opportunity to connect and network. And it's not quite the collective, but I think we all have a lot of things to share. So with that, I just want to thank everyone for joining us today and wish you all a very happy holiday and a very safe holiday, and looking forward to talking to you in 2026.